It's joint practice week for the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Cleveland Browns, and all eyes should be on Andrew Mukuba. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Tuesday edition of the show. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. The Philadelphia Eagles heading into the second week of the preseason, taking on the Cleveland Browns this weekend. But before they do that, over the next 3 days, they'll have joint practices against Cleveland, or at least full padded competitive drills over the next 2 days against Cleveland. And for me, the preseason is more important than anything in the offseason, over training camp, over joint practices. But these practices set up against opposing teams, I think, are close to being as important as the preseason. Some would argue that it's more important because the coaches on both sides, they have things set up specifically to help for live game action. It's a more controlled environment where they can work on specific things, but it's in a more competitive environment than your natural training camp where you're going up against your teammates on both sides of the ball. So some would argue that joint practice is as important as the preseason, if not more. For me, though, nothing does beat live action, when the bullets are truly flying in between the hash marks. That to me is where I'm evaluating talent the most for who should make the 53-man roster, for, who should win a starting job. But joint practices are intense. A lot of the times, again, coaches, front offices, organizations alike, they would prefer that your starters get ready for the season through these controlled environments rather than play in the preseason. So for the starters, for Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and for the first team on both sides of the ball, joint practices are more important. But for the second, third stringers, that's where I watch the preseason. And one of those guys that right now is a second stringer that could, with a strong week in joint practices in the preseason game against Cleveland, that could jump from the second team to the first team, is rookie safety Andrew Mukuba. I'm watching him closer than anybody this week. Why? Because the Philadelphia Eagles need him. For me, look, if the Eagles are going to truly replace and maybe even upgrade in certain areas who C.J. Gardner-Johnson was for this team at safety in 2024, if they're going to replace that player and not deal with the same issues that plagued their defense in the secondary in 2023, it's got to be Drew Mukuba. I like Sidney Brown. I think he has some very rare traits, his speed, his range, his hit power is very unique. I think he's a very interesting third safety in a rotation, in dime packages. I think there is a role for him on defense. I think he's a really good special teams gunner. There is absolutely a place for Sidney Brown on this defense. But if they're going to upgrade or at least break even with who Gardner-Johnson was last year, I think it has to be Mukuba. And this week against the Browns in joint practices and then in this preseason game, it's so important for Mukuba to have a strong week because he has missed practice over the last couple weeks. He did not play in the first preseason game. He's missed reps because of that shoulder injury. And Vic Fangio talks all the time about how, you can get mental reps and you can grow in the film room, but there's nothing like learning on the field. And I use this analogy or this comparison all the time on the show. It's very similar to Cooper DeJean last year. Cooper DeJean, so clear and obviously was the best player for the slot cornerback position, but because of that hamstring injury that kept him out a lot of August, kept him out the preseason, Vic Fangio was not comfortable playing a rookie that missed a lot of on-field reps from week one and on. Fangio is not somebody that is scared to play young players. He started Quinyon Mitchell from the jump last year and put a lot on his plate. He will put a lot on a rookie. He did that with Cooper DeJean once he was ready after the bye week. But he also prioritizes on-field reps to learn his scheme. And if you are not on the football field, you're probably not going to start from the jump. It's going to take a little bit of time. That's why it's been so important for Jahad Campbell to be on the field. And the fact that he has practiced over the last month, and he's been one of the best players on this roster over the last 2 weeks in practice and in the preseason. Like, that's massive. Now Jahad Campbell, I think, is absolutely going to be the starter week 1. If Andrew Mukuba is going to join his fellow day 1, day 2 pick from this draft class on the starting defense, he's got to have a strong week this week against Cleveland. Because after this, they're getting ready to set this depth chart. They're getting ready to get this roster down to 53 players and really focus on the regular season. So this is a big week for Drew. If he can have a strong joint practice, if he can have a strong preseason game, show some versatility, make plays in deep coverage, potentially in man if he comes down and plays slot, like if Fangio starts to put a little bit more on his plate like he has Jahad Campbell, that can go a long way for Mukuba beating out Sidney Brown. Because right now, Brown is the starting safety next to Reed Blankenship, and I think the Eagles would prefer if Mukuba wins that job. I think the Eagles' defense, the safety position ceiling is higher with Drew Mukuba than it is Sidney Brown. I think, again, if they're going to replicate what they had last year and in 2022 at safety and not deal with what happened in 2023, again, I don't think Sidney Brown's going to be as bad as, Terrell Edmonds was that year, or Jaquaski Tart in the offseason, or even Kevin Byard after the trade deadline. I think Sid's going to be an upgrade over those players. If they want to be potentially great, or if they still want safety to be a strength and not something they're just winning with, I think it's got to be Drew Mukuba, and this is the week to do it. Because if he doesn't do it this week, if he still shows like he's a little bit farther behind than some of the other rookies, some of the other players on defense, then he probably is not going to start right away. So I think they need him to be that guy right away, and so hopefully he shows that he can make some plays on the football field. He's missed some practice. He's missed games due to injury. I'm watching Drew Mukuba probably more than anybody because I'm still more confident in Keely Ringo and even Jacorian Bennett than I am Sidney Brown at safety. So safety is the position that I'm a little bit more concerned about in the secondary versus corner. Because at corner, you've got Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. You've got 2 elite pieces of the 3. Whereas at safety, it's like I think Reed Blankenship's a good player, but I think he's, in an ideal world, he's your second best safety. Drew Mukuba, I don't think Sidney Brown is going to be better than Reed Blankenship. I think Drew Mukuba can be better than Reed Blankenship. Maybe not off the bat, but I think this is a huge week for him. And so for me personally, I'm watching nobody closer in joint practices than the Eagles' rookie second-round pick. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, Landon Dickerson. We avoided a serious injury. He is not out for the year with any sort of serious meniscus injury, so they dodged a bullet. It got me thinking, though, who's the player? Like, if Landon Dickerson went down, how much does that hurt this football team? Who are the players that, due to injury, the Eagles just cannot afford to lose in 2025 if they want to remain Super Bowl favorites? We'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. The NFL kickoff is right around the corner, and that means fantasy football season is back and in full swing. This year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. We have our 16-season-long Fantasy League draft in Yahoo Fantasy this Saturday with 13 of my best friends, and we do things crazy in our Fantasy League. We've done Guillotine, Best Ball, just classic head-to-head. We've done Keeper Leagues and Dynasty. Yahoo Fantasy, they have all the features that you need to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness. Yahoo Fantasy, they're actually dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. And to kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's only one team left standing. But again, if you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues, or you can join a public league as well. Stay tuned for more killer announcements. Start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now. Go to yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We all took a big sigh of relief yesterday hearing the news that while, yes, Landon Dickerson will be week to week with a meniscus injury that will require a procedure, and it might put his season opener debut in doubt, in jeopardy. He might not play against the Cowboys, but the hope is that he does play in that game. And the fact that there's even a chance he plays in the opener, as I said on the show yesterday, that is a massive win. hearing how the vibe was at the link on Sunday, seeing him limp, get carried off the field, and then get carted off the field into the locker room, it was concerning. And we know Landon Dickerson has a long history of serious leg injuries, a torn ACL in both his left and right leg. I thought personally he was out for the year. I was starting to wonder what their long-term plan is at guard for this season. Is it Matt Pryor? Do you move Drew Kendall from center to guard or give one of those other rookies like Miles Hinton a chance? Kenyon Green, we know now, is just probably not even going to make the roster, but could he have had a chance to compete for that starting job? Dickerson avoided that kind of serious injury that would have put the Eagles in a hole. But again, my brain was there. I was thinking that he was out. And so that got me thinking today, that's going to happen. The Eagles have been very, very fortunate from 2021 to 2025 that they really haven't had to overcome a lot of serious season-ending injuries or long-term injuries to core pieces on either side of the ball. I mean, you lost Lane Johnson for a couple games here and there. You had to play without Jalen Hurts for a game or two a year. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith missed a couple games. Dallas Goedert always misses about a month. But, they've never had a Jalen Carter, and let's knock on wood here for a second, Jalen Carter, that kind of caliber player has never really torn his ACL and has been out for the year, right? I mean, even Cooper DeJean, he missed the first month of last year because of that injury that held him back as a rookie. But again, they've been very fortunate. I mean, 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls, they've been in it, and they've been pretty much at full health. That's unbelievable injury luck. But we know, even though the football gods gave us this one and Landon Dickerson's okay, we know this credit is going to come due. They're going to come collect. Just like they did in 2017, 2018, 2019, and in 2020. You're going to have to overcome that and still remain a Super Bowl contender. 2017, they did that. I even give 2018 and those 2019 teams a lot of credit. They underperformed, but considering the catastrophic amount of injuries they dealt with, they overcame and still remained contenders and made the playoffs, won divisions, won playoff games. I give those teams a lot of credit. So it's going to happen. When it does, who are the guys, though, that you just might not be able to overcome? Who are the guys you just can't afford to lose? And I think Jalen Hurts is the obvious one, so let's remove quarterback from the equation. Even though Tanner McKee, I still think, can get you to the playoffs, who is the other guy that, outside of Jalen Hurts, if he just goes down, you don't think this team could win a Super Bowl? Or who are the players? I ranked 5 players that are more irreplaceable than anybody else on the 53. For me, there are 5 guys. Number 1, it's Lane Johnson. Number 2, it's Jordan Mailata. Number 3, Jalen Carter. Number 4, Quinyon Mitchell. And then number 5, Nolan Smith. For me, your top 2, I think it has to be the tackles. Lane and Jordan Mailata, 2 of the top 5 best players at their position. It's 2 of the top 3 most important positions in the NFL. And when you also look at the drop-off from a depth perspective, if A.J. Brown goes down, obviously he makes the passing game go, but you still have Devontae Smith. You still have Jahan Dotson, who I think is going to be – he's starting to look really good in training camp, and he was really good in that first preseason game. You've still got Devontae Smith and Jahan Dotson, 2 first-round talent wide receivers. You have Dallas Goedert still at tight end. You have Saquon Barkley in the backfield. You have Jalen Hurts' ability to run, and I think people underrate his ability to elevate outside of structure in the passing game as well. So you still have a lot of creators on offense if an A.J. Brown went down or Devontae Smith, and you have an elite offensive line. I think you look at other positions even on defense, if Zach Baun went down, you do still have Jahad Campbell. You do have eventually Nakobe Dean and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. But at tackle, if Jordan Mailata goes down or Lane Johnson goes down, who do you have? It's Kendall Lamb. It's Darian Kennard. Are you playing Miles Hinton or Cameron Williams, one of the rookies? Is it Matt Pryor? He played some right tackle in the preseason opener. Is Tyler Steen somebody that swings over from guard to tackle since he played tackle at Alabama? These are the things that they would have to consider. And that is maybe the biggest drop-off in talent on this roster is a top 5 player, top 3 in my opinion, and I think top 1 in Lane Johnson, top 5 at least in Jordan Mailata. You're going to go from a top 5 player to somebody that is not a starting caliber NFL player. This Eagles roster is so deep that at other spots, they don't really deal with that reality. So for me, it's obvious. Landon Dickerson would have been a big loss, but it would have been nowhere near the loss of Mailata or Lane. I think outside of Jalen Hurts, losing those two, that makes the biggest impact on your team. If one of those guys goes down, especially Lane Johnson, I think you're in a lot of trouble. And then for me, it's three defensive players. It's Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, and then it's Nolan Smith. Jalen Carter, I think defensive tackle, there is more options, starting caliber players there than other spots because you do still have Moro Ojoma, who's been one of the best players this summer at Eagles training camp. You do have Jordan Davis, who looks like he's in really good shape. He's an elite two-down run stopper that maybe will develop as a pass rusher this year. Ty Robinson had a sack in his first game against Cincinnati. Gabe Hall looks like one of the preseason training camp heroes that's going to make this roster. He shined with multiple quarterback pressures in that game, had a really good run stop in the red zone. Somebody that me and Gino at the time really liked coming out of Baylor in that draft class a couple years ago. So the Eagles are pretty deep on the interior. Plus you got guys that can, help out on the edge. Like you have a Nolan Smith that can make up that pass rush production. But for me, Jalen Carter is a top 5 player on this roster, and he is a top 3 player at his position. He is such a game wrecker, and his impact, while, the options behind him, it's more of a replaceable spot, he is not a replaceable player. Like, his impact, how offenses just, it's like, to make an NBA comparison, like the Jokic orbit, where Nuggets players are just orbiting around him because the defense is doubling, at times triple teaming Jokic, and it creates and opens up so much for his teammates. Like LeBron James had that same kind of impact. Aaron Donald, to make a comparison at Jalen Carter's position, had this kind of impact where guys around him were getting mismatches. They were getting easy one-on-one looks because the offensive line, the tight ends, the running backs, they are all trying to chip and stop Jalen Carter. I mean, Jalen was double-teamed almost more than anybody in football last year. There were times that he was triple-teamed, and yet he still got to the quarterback. I mean, you don't win a championship last year without Jalen Carter. He was one of, if not the best players in the postseason. He had 9 quarterback pressures. I mean, he had 2 sacks in that game against the Los Angeles Rams, including the game-winning sack that saved your championship season. Like, he's just too instrumental to this football team where he's the alpha right now in your defensive line. Like, if you need a sack in the clutch like that moment against the Rams, you need Jalen Carter. I'm trying to actually pull up that stat. Carter had an incredible playoff stat that just shows his impact. So here it is. Yeah, Jalen Carter generated 19 pressures while lined up as a defensive tackle in the Eagles' Super Bowl run. No other interior defensive lineman in the last 5 seasons has recorded more than 13 pressures in a single postseason. Nobody in the last 5 years has had more than 13 pressures in the postseason. Jalen Carter last year had 19. So, yeah, they have Moro Ojoma, they have Jordan Davis, they have Ty Robinson. They're not Jalen Carter. Like, you can't replace that player. He's a top 3 player in his position that has an Aaron Donald-like impact on an offense's game plan. That is not somebody that is very replaceable. And then for me, it's Quinyon Mitchell and Nolan Smith, because if you lose Quinyon Mitchell, especially this year if he's shadowing receivers, I think you're in some trouble at corner. Like, yeah, obviously you still have Cooper DeJean, but I mean, without Quinyon Mitchell, you're going to have to start two of these 3 players, Keely Ringo, Jacorian Bennett, and Adoree Jackson. I don't think you're feeling very good about that. Quinyon, I think, looks like he's going to have an all-pro breakout season. Having that kind of shutdown corner was so huge in winning a title last year. I don't think you can afford to lose Quinyon. And then because that would also handcuff Cooper DeJean playing nickel and safety. Like, if you lose Quinyon, now Cooper DeJean's got to play on the outside and be your number 1 corner. I think having Quinyon Mitchell allows Cooper DeJean, other players on this defense, to do more and to have different roles. And then Nolan Smith is number 5 because, kind of like Jalen Carter, he's your alpha on the edge. And unlike Jalen Carter, if Nolan Smith goes down, I mean, Jalix Hunt, as much as I like him and I think he's going to break out this year, he's not ready to be the go-to pass rusher on the edge. And it's Josh Uche and Azeez Ojulari. I still like them as rotational pieces, but Nolan Smith, kind of like Jalen Carter, what they're going to ask of him, he's the only guy on this roster that can do that. Like A.J. Brown, what he's asked to do, I think Devontae Smith, if given the chance, could also do that. You look at the guard position. What Landon Dickerson is asked to do, I think another player could also do. Even Saquon Barkley. Nobody's going to be Saquon Barkley, but I think the Eagles could still have an effective run game like they did before Saquon if he did get injured. But I think with Nolan Smith, if he goes down, what he's asked to do is very difficult to replicate, at least with the personnel that they have on the roster. So those are the 5 guys. I don't think you can afford to lose them. Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, and Nolan Smith. And then A.J. Brown was that kind of last guy that I didn't make on the list that was close, that I definitely considered. All right, guys, we'll wrap up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, I have been kind of concerned and talking about what the Eagles are going to do at corner, safety, and defensive line after a lackluster preseason opener, but I do want to kind of put things in perspective coming up next. I do think we're dealing with some first world problems on this Eagles roster. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. All right, guys, this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, August 26th is officially FanDuel Future Days, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. For me, I want to put my flyer on Jalen Hurts to win MVP. When it comes to like a dark horse division winner, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars this year are going to bounce back and win the AFC South. You can bet it all on FanDuel. Visit the FanDuel app today. Start planning your future bets right now. They have everything. Again, MVPs, division winners. You can crown your Super Bowl champion. I hope that you're betting on the Philadelphia Eagles repeating as back-to-back champions in San Francisco. You can do all of that even before week 1 between the Eagles and the Cowboys kicks off at FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, guys, we are wrapping up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for joining us and making us your first listen each and every day. We were talking the other day, and Keely Ringo was shaky, to say the least, against the Bengals. Adoree Jackson, that would be an understatement. I thought he was pretty terrible in that first game. I don't think he's been very good in the practices that I've seen. Overall, just even the footage and what I've heard from beat reporters at practices that I haven't been able to see, just doesn't look like he is a starting caliber corner anymore. I'm sorry, I just don't think he's that guy. Sidney Brown right now, I have some concerns about him being the full-time starting safety next to Reed Blankenship. That's why I said this is such a huge week for Andrew Mukuba. I want to see him go out there, play, make plays in the joint practices, go out there and make plays in the preseason. I want him to go win that job because I don't think Sidney Brown can be who C.J. Gardner-Johnson was last year. I think Drew Mukuba could get close to that caliber of player, if not even offer things that Gardner-Johnson couldn't do from like a man coverage perspective, playing more in the slot. I think Andrew Mukuba could be a very important key player to this defense. So there are some concerns about this roster when you zoom in. Like Uche and Azeez Ojulari weren't great on Saturday. I'm a little bit concerned about the edge depth. But overall, when you really put it, I think I started to realize this because I was doing Locked On NFL as I do every Monday morning with Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, which, by the way, you can check out on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. I was just talking about other rosters, other team situations, and it did put things in perspective that we're kind of dealing with some first world problems with the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, even if you go back to 2017, 2018, 2019, you go back to some of their really good rosters, seasons where the Eagles were, still a good football team. I think in those years, they still had problems. Like, in those seasons, they didn't have a completely loaded roster, top to bottom, where there were no problems. Like, they had to win with some players. They didn't win because of everybody. And that's the reality in the NFL. Like, we were spoiled in 2024 with a near perfect roster. Again, it was a top 5 team, in my opinion, in the history of the NFL. Talent and health combined. Not only were they that talented, but again, like I said earlier in the show, they weren't injured. They've had a fully healthy elite roster in 2 of the last 3 Super Bowl runs an NFL team has had. And even the role players, like that they didn't expect to be stars, like they were also stars. I mean, heck, even Oren Burks comes in the playoffs, and Isaiah Rodgers fills in at times for Darius Slay, and they're making plays like elite players in the postseason. Everybody that was on the field, it just felt like they stepped up. Even Moro Ijoma is like the third or fourth defensive tackle. Jordan Davis had 2 sacks in the NFC title in the Super Bowl. Like, that is not going to be the reality every year. Even this year, with as good as this football team looks on paper and all the stars that are coming back and even growing, ascending on both sides of the ball, the reality in the NFL is that some players you're going to have to win with. You're not always going to have stars, great players at every starting position. The 2017 team didn't. Jalen Mills wasn't an elite football player. Ronald Darby was not an elite football player. They won with their corners. They didn't win because of their cornerbacks. You look at even on the offensive side of the football, for a while, they had to win with their running backs, not win because of their running backs. There were not stars on every position of that football team. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs and the Super Bowls that they've won, the New England Patriots, the consistent contenders. They've had a lot of the same stars year after year at the most important positions, but they didn't have stars at every single spot. So I think we do need to put that in perspective. Like, you can still be a Super Bowl favorite and have a Keely Ringo on this football team starting. Or even me, I want Andrew Mukuba to start, but I don't think Sidney Brown starting doesn't suddenly make you a Super Bowl team. The Eagles were dealing with some significant issues on defense in 2023, and even so, they still ended up starting 10-1. So you can still do it with an imperfect roster. Now, that's not to say they should settle or that these guys that we're discussing can't be stars. Jalix Hunt, Moro Ijoma, Keely Ringo, Sidney Brown, Tyler Steen. I'm not saying these guys can't be stars, and you should strive to have no holes on your roster. That's what I love about how he's roster strategy the last few years, is that he's finally saying, no, I'm not going to settle at linebacker anymore. I'm not going to settle at corner. I'm not going to settle at safety. Like, yeah, I'm going to prioritize some positions more than others and invest more assets in some than others, but I'm not settling anymore. And I love that. And that's how you got that 2024 roster. That's how you did that. But the reality is, every single year, you're not always going to have that kind of execution. The mindset should always be there, but the execution won't always pan out. As long as though you have good, maybe not great players, but good players at every starting spot, you could be a consistent Super Bowl contender. Now, if you have, below average, mediocre players that, like a Bradley Fletcher that you're just settling for, or you're bringing in the Zach Cunninghams of the world at linebacker, yeah, no. If you're trying to just get by at positions, you're trying to sign Terrell Edmonds off the streets or Jaquaski Tart in June or July, like, yeah, for the most part, that's normally not going to work. And normally you're not going to win a Super Bowl if you have like significant liabilities, like a James Bradbury in 2023 on the football field consistently. But like, I do think we need to find a middle ground where, like, yeah, I don't want average, I don't want mediocrity in the starting lineup, but good is okay. Like, it's okay to have some good players. Keely Ringo this year is not going to be a great player, in my opinion. I think he's going to be a good player. Can he be your third best cornerback? Like, that's the thing. None of these guys that we're discussing or even kind of concerned about discussing upgrading over, none of them have massive roles. That's what I want to put in perspective. Keely Ringo is not going to be asked this year to cover CeeDee Lamb all game or Terry McLaurin. Like, that's just not the reality. Sidney Brown is not going to be asked to wear the hats that even a Malcolm Jenkins did back in the day, or even Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Like, that's not going to be the reality. You look at Josh Uche and Azeez Ojulari. The hope is that they're your third and fourth pass rushers. If they're just good players, solid players, like, that's okay. Again, I'm somebody that doesn't want to strive for or settle. I want to strive for great at every spot. I don't want to settle, but it's okay if some of them pan out to be just good, not great. I heard the Buffalo Bills GM get going back and forth with my brother, who's hosts on the Buffalo Bills radio network. Brandon Beane and him got into a back and forth with Brandon Beane saying, you can't have it all. And it felt like he was almost settling, like saying, look, the reality is in the NFL, you can't have great players at every position, and so I'm not going to try. That was how I interpret it. I wouldn't like that if Howie Roseman came out and said something like that, or if that's the way they were going about this roster, as I feel like they kind of have in the past. But that's not what they're doing. Again, though, the philosophy versus the execution is different. And if it pans out this year where Mukuba or Brown are just good, not great. Keely Ringo's just good, not great. Uche and Oziz Ojulari are okay, but they're not elite players. I think that'll be okay considering how good this football team is. So while we are zooming in because we do shows every day and we all love to overreact during games and we like to, we love football. We love to analyze these players in a vacuum individually, as we should. That's good analysis. But when you kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the grand scheme of things, what this team's problems are compared to others, even like contenders like the Detroit Lions and what the San Francisco 49ers had to deal with last year, even what the Eagles have had to deal with in the past. They are first world problems, and I think we should just remember that. So get off my soapbox for a minute. Hope you enjoyed today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.